Hello, Gernot, and welcome to a new episode. We are live streaming today. I'm in Heidelberg, and you are joining us from Salzburg. And today we're going to talk about event psychology and specifically about future of events and MICE destinations. So, to our audience who don't know who you are, maybe you can introduce yourself and your role.
Sure. Well, my role is the managing director of the Salzburg Convention Bureau. I work here since 13 years, more than 13 years. And my background is actually the latest academic background is a master in training and development. So I try to catch up with the newest academic knowledge in terms of training, so adult education, and on the other side development, so human development, especially development when it comes to organizations, organizational systems, and also the individual development of a human being when it comes to coaching, etc. I specialized in the field of emotional regulation, emotional labor, and then with a very basic set of theories, well-researched theories of motivational orientation, which is called relational focus, and the psychological basic needs, which are two theories that are very big in motivation and motivational theories. So this is what I look at today as well when we have our talk, because that's my background and that's what I specialized in my research, and that's what we also look at when we do our daily jobs here in Salzburg at the Convention Bureau.
Excellent. So we are going into the topic of event psychology, but just before, I think that our audience is very curious today to know about the current state of events. So from your experience being the managing director of the Salzburg Convention Bureau, what type of requests are you receiving right now?
So this is a very broad field because we look after scientific meetings and congresses and scientific conferences, and the bidding process for conferences didn't stop so far for us because it's a long-term perspective. So the bids we're in at the moment are from 23 to 27. So in fact, it helped us that the association meeting segment has a long-term perspective. It's more the corporate side of things, corporate events, seminars, incentives, etc., product events that we're looking at the moment. And we saw an increase after the lockdown was closed or ended last year and also this year. We saw a big increase in, or a big demand in inquiries for HR events, I would say, on the one side. So HR events meaning companies wanting their employees to get together again, because some of them have never met ever since they're working in that company. So it seems to be more a social aspect for a lot of companies who want to and who need to bring together their teams, their divisions, the different regional offices, etc. That's one thing which we saw an increase at the moment. And the other thing is product launches and product events. So, for example, automotive events, which is a very important segment for us. Any kind of larger product that is not so mobile. So if you have a car presentation, you cannot just easily send a car to everybody's participants' home and they participate virtually and then they try out the car. This is something, especially when it comes to the experience of a larger immobile product, we see an increase in the demand, and some of the venues who are specialized in those kind of large product presentations, product launches, product trainings, they actually saw an increase of business compared to 2019, because this was a segment that came back very quick, and it's just you just need to train dealers on the products they need to sell in their stores or in the car houses, etc.
Yeah, very interesting. I totally agree with you on the HR aspect, because employees have been working so hard from home, and there's such a need for connection and reconnection and meeting those team members we never met. So it's absolutely, and definitely regarding the product launches, I also hear from very big agencies that the road shows are also very popular, and it's also in connection with the product launches and the press events as well.
It's getting more. Sorry, maybe just to add, it's true that it's more roadshows. So it's probably smaller events at one destination, but it's more different destinations, so that events try to go in front of the door of their participants. So it's rather than flying in everybody to one destination, you do a roadshow at everybody's doorstep.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Okay, so let's now talk specifically about event psychology, and everyone who is watching us right now on LinkedIn or on YouTube, feel free to ask also your questions. We have a set of questions about event psychology, but I want to invite you also to ask questions regarding anything that we cover right now. So, Gernot, event psychology is becoming an increasingly important topic in the events industry. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, first of all, I think psychology has always been a very important subject when it comes to communication, and I think events are not. I don't think it is. It's already clear. Events are just like a media channel in your communication strategy or your communication system, just like a newsletter, social media, and other things. Why it is so important? I think that it's becoming increasingly important because people are just because of books like Event Psychology from Stefan Bonhoeffer, for example. Those kind of the information is more accessible. Psychology, especially during COVID, I think we all started to be more self-reflective. Not everybody knows that they do a self-reflection and reflect more the things. It's not a conscious process. Self-reflection is probably not always a conscious process, but a process that is running unconsciously. And I think because we reflect what we do and if the things we did in the past before COVID, we think about, does it make sense anymore? We have a certain feeling for it. And there come emotions, and emotions are probably the basic for a lot of things that we see in behavior later on, in our behavior. And because we can feel that something changed or that there is a dissonance, it's like flight shaming, or are we flying to all the conferences again or not, or no matter if it's what your motivation is, but there is a feeling, and maybe we call it somatic markers in neuropsychology. So you have certain parts in your body where you can really feel your emotions. Like you're stressed, and probably I feel stress in my stomach. That's my somatic marker, I know. So now I think about this consciously, but if you don't think about it consciously, you just have a feeling. But the feelings already, and your subconsciousness tells you that there is something, So when people like you talk about event psychology, or other people in our industry talk about event psychology, I think people take it as a subconscious trigger to and think, oh, that's very interesting, not knowing and not being a professional, but still listening to it. So it's more a question of the information is there, and it is broadly broadcasted, like now today in this broadcast.
Yeah, it's very interesting to apply the concept of psychology to events and human behavior. And for example, me, I got interested in it after meeting Victoria Matei. She's also specializing in event psychology, and has been participating in many online discussions where she just shared examples why certain things make sense and others not, what might bring more attendees to enjoy the conference, or for example, a very basic thing that comes to mind is the choice. Like if you have a lot of choice in the program of the conference, if you have many speakers, or so like having a big choice doesn't help us to make better choices. So this is, for example, one aspect of psychology that can be applied to events. But out of many aspects, we are going to talk about a specific concept, which is called learning taxonomy. And let's look at the three types of learning taxonomy and how can they help event planners design better events.
Learning taxonomy is a very broad subject, and very often there is a particular researcher, a psychologist who is mentioned in a lot of books. But in fact, I think we need to focus on three different aspects of learning taxonomies. And one aspect is the cognitive learning goals, pure telling and receiving of information. So it's a cognitive, not a constructive way of knowledge transfer. So cognitive learning goals, which is like you're sitting there listening to a speaker, just consuming the information. There is probably no interaction, because it's not constructive constructivity. It's not following the constructivity theory, where you have a social loop, and which is engaging with the audience. Secondly, we have affective learning goals. Affective learning goals would mean we are not only looking at telling people what they need to know, and they just need to learn it in whatever way they need to learn, but we also want to probably change people's personal development. So let's say, I think in German, then I need to translate it into English. So forgive me for probably sometimes taking a second, because I need to find the words in English. But in fact, and it's about affects and also emotions. So if you have like a certain, I don't know, if you're especially extroverted person and you're a salesperson, you probably have this kind of, soft skills. Usually you call it soft skills. And these kind of soft skills have something to do with your personality, or with different kinds of mindsets. And in order to change those mindsets, again, underlying we have emotions, again, in order to change those, you need to set affective learning targets, learning goals. And that's affective learning goals. And the third one would be the psychomotoric learning targets, like having an employee working at the Volkswagen garage, or at the, I don't know, Audi, Mercedes. I'm not paid by any brand. So somebody's who's working at a car garage, and who needs to learn how to repair the car, and that's psychomotoric learning goals. And these three learning goals are quite important, because if you look at those, you automatically know, okay, what kind of setting do I need for my meeting? Do I have a real conference, or do I just have a webinar, or not even a webinar, just a talk you can stream whenever? Is it necessary that you do it live? Like you do something not just cognitively, because this is a live stream where people can join in and talk to us. So it's interactively. But if you're looking at changing people's behavior, you much more like affective learning goals. You much more need different kind of setups. You need smaller groups. You need the more, maybe also a physical life set, so that people can meet at one physical place, because we know that from research, we know that this kind of aspects from the senses, from your different senses, smelling or touching, whatever, we know that this supports the fact on how the social development of a group and your personal development evolves. So, for example, we know that if you're missing out on the human touch. So somebody, let's say you are a young speaker, you're doing presenting a scientific paper at a conference, and you do that for the first time. You have two options when we define virtual meetings or physical meetings. If you go on stage virtually and present your paper for the first time, you're sitting alone at an office, at your home office maybe. There's nobody who is just telling you, hey, great, probably touching your shoulders and motivating you. You will do that great. Instead of meeting up physically, where somebody backstage will tell you, maybe your professor who supported you with the paper tells you, you will do a great job. This paper is great. Hey, you'll do a good job. Go on stage and rock the crowd, And this automatically changes the feeling of people and changes their personal development. It probably doesn't change the development and the individual needs of everybody in the audience, but it's one person, and that person might do a different kind of presentation in a different quality than they would do it online. Yeah. So this is just to give you an idea of how different things should be when it comes to learning taxonomies, but there are things like motivational orientation, and basic psychological needs as well that need to be fulfilled as well at conferences and looked at.
Yeah, that's a very complex topic, and I think we can talk hours about it. So anyone who is watching this right now or after recording, feel free to get in touch with Gernot and ask him your questions. Yeah, so it's really important kind of when starting the planning process and the event design to actually think about it. And I do think that these things have to be improved in the events industry in general, when we need to be more mindful and considerate when planning events, because it costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of time. And right now also people are indeed taking the decision whether they want to attend a live event or they prefer attending virtual. Mm-hmm. So this is like what you talked about. It's really an area of consideration, thinking, and improvement that we need to do to when we organize events. But like looking at the wider landscape of events right now, are there any other aspects that need to be improved in the way we organize events?
I think there are many things that need to be improved. Well, I come from the destination marketing side of things. So I think a very big problem is the sheer amount of events we have. In our industry, destinations and other companies like real exhibitions, when it comes to, for example, IBTM or IMAX, as the two big conferences and exhibitions in our industry, but also destinations and hotel chains who do their client events, they basically have their personal thoughts about these events, and they bring in their personal opinion about the events. And you probably ask people about the content they want to discover at those events. But what rarely happens is that you look at the basic psychological needs of each participant and of the motivational orientation of each participant, which is highly linked to the emotional side of delegates. For example, there are three different basic human needs, psychological needs, and those are autonomy, to have the freedom to discover and do whatever you want or what is within your values and set of values. You have competence as a need, which means that you need to feel yourself effective of what you're doing. So, for example, if you go to a conference, you meet suppliers as a client, or you meet other colleagues, you come back from a conference and then you're in the office, and then the question is, what do I do with the things I learned or experienced during that past conference or exhibition? So you probably come back to your office and have a lot of ideas. You brought a big network of new people with you, and then your boss, for example, tells you, oh, that's interesting, but it was more thought as an incentive that you go to this exhibition or that you go to this farm trip or whatever. And I don't think we really have the time to realize all of your ideas. So immediately people after a conference, and that's why the after is so important. After a conference, the delegates won't feel self efficiency. So then people need to feel that it has an effect what they do. It has an effect on themselves, so that they get feedback on you did this well, or you could do this better, or there are chances to do in the future. And if people don't feel that it's effective what they do and what they learned, and that they effectively can roll it out in their day-to-day life, they probably might not come back to conferences, or they might get bored, or they might just do it the next time because it's just a social norm to go there because you meet all your colleagues there. And third of all, it's relatedness. We do things because we want to feel related to others, and we want to feel that we are part of others and that others care for us. So this kind of social relatedness is very important, and I think this is something we know that at the moment it's harder to do this to fulfill this need of relatedness, for example, at virtual conferences or when you participate virtually, compared to the fact that you participate at a conference physically. So this is also the reason why a lot of associations, corporate clients, they probably do hybrid meetings, but the delegates who participate at a hybrid meeting virtually, they actually are a target for future physical participation, because they might see during the day the speakers and listen to them and might have some networking, but in the evening, they're not a part of having a beer at the hotel bar. And they're kind of left out. So the need for relatedness is not fulfilled. Mm. And yeah, that's about those three aspects there as well.
Yeah, I want to add and build on this, what you said. Now, one word that kind of emerged out of this kind of the need to be related is the serendipity. So that's actually this beer that you go to drink in a bar and you just bump into some colleagues and you brainstorm ideas. That's often missing in the virtual environment, this random meetup. And yes, it's important to also design for this serendipity, if it's networking in the queue, for example, while waiting for the beer or for the lunch. So yeah, it's a lot of psychological concepts that can be applied. We have some people watching us on LinkedIn. So if you have questions, please share, ask Gernot, it's your chance. Unfortunately, I can't see the name of the person asking. So please, if you can just write after the question your name so I can bring it on the screen. Yeah, so let's go to the next question. We need to create this change, right? And change can be difficult. It can be not wished by someone. So how can we start the change process?
Well, I think first of all, we need to start a change process just when it's necessary. I see a lot of organizations, not just in tourism, and I focus on DMOs and change process consultancy, etc., and helping DMOs with knowledge. And a lot of them, they do change process after change process. So once you get used to that a person has a new role in their company, and then you say, oh, you are now, I don't know, stakeholder relations manager. What is that? What are you doing exactly? And then they tell you, oh, this is don't care. In half a year we'll have another role because we're just changing again. So first of all, you need to have a look who in your organization or in your let's probably say in your system. If you look at it systematically, you have a different a system basically, and participants, for example, and who of them needs a change? That's the first question. who needs a change, and what kind of change do they need? Is it just because you as a event planner or the owner of the conference, that is it your need for change? Or is it really your target audience's need for a change? And what kind of changes need to be made? I think that's the first question. And very often change processes are kicked off because it's cool and it's nice to have a change process, because you need to do a change process, and you need to find a new strategy. And out of that strategy, and usually strategies are made a lot, I see, in touristical organizations for like 5 years. Some brave organizations do it for 10 or 15 years. And then again, the question comes in, do I actually need a strategy? Or do you need a strategy, and why do you have a strategy? Because sometimes a strategy could be implemented in a company because, not just because it's cool, but because you were kind of afraid to not have a strategy. And in particular situations like COVID-19 is a perfect example. And you might have heard about the VUCA world, which is also a buzzword, I know, but it has some truth to it. So basically, feeling the need of doing and having and following a strategy and rolling it out as a change process sometimes comes out of the fact that you're not as adaptive as an organization or a brand as you should be to things that you just can't cover in a strategy. And I think it's more important to look at the values of your product or your conference you're looking after, and the way you treat others and want to be treated, instead of just having a strategy that tells you exactly what is our to-do list in the next 5 years. Frederic Laloux said that, and I brought that with me because I love the book. It's called Reinventing Organizations, and it's another book tip I can give you, because he's looking at organizations that are probably not even having a strategy, but still they're a world market leader in their industry. And I find that very interesting. So the question again is, if you need to start a change process, you should have a look at the pain points of your audience and your own pain points, of course. But you need to be very aware of that just because it's your own pain point and you want to change, it doesn't necessarily is the same for your target audience. So to kick off a change process, you need to get professionals who help you, organizational psychologists, change psychologists, for example, or other professionals and consultants who have a lot of experience with that, and who also have an experience or where you also have the feeling that they share the same values. Because a lot of organizational consultants, they have a master's degree in economics, but they don't know anything about psychology. So it's a very important point to who are you listening to when it comes to your change process. Yeah? And it should be something who helps you to reflect yourself and your organization instead of just doing it.
I like that you talked about, like, you have to consider what your audience wants and what you want as an organization. So that's I want to ask you a question, one question related to this. So if you, as an audience, want a virtual component to an event, but the organizer says, no, we want back to live, we want live event. But you, as an audience, you said, okay, I restructured my life, I'm good working from home, being more present for my family. So you, as the audience, should you look for a different event, or should you kind of try to present this point of view to the organizer? How the organizer and the attendee can find this common ground and understand each other's needs?
It's hard for me to tell or give advice on what the participant should do. I mean, from my personal perspective, when I go to industry conferences, or when I participated at industry conferences in the past 2 years now, and even before, we stopped participating in a lot of conferences who just didn't fulfill our needs. Let's keep it as simple as that. It's a question of if you should probably go to the event planner or the organizer of that conference, is a question of, are you interested in being a part of the change? And there, that's actually what I think is very interesting, because a lot of people, it's like sitting in a big audience in a plenary session. Then the speaker says, "Oh, yeah, that's it. I'm finished. Are there any questions?" And then there are 1,000 people sitting in the plenary session, and probably 2% or 1% are not afraid to ask questions in front of everybody, because some people might think they're social. It's social norms probably, but people might think, "Oh no, I'm not sure if my question is smart enough," etc. So the question is, as an organization, an event organizer, are you setting social norms, or are you trying to be kind of on the same level of sight, eye level, or are you just not interested? Because if the delegates will tell you if you are open, if you're interested in that kind of feedback, not just did you like the lunch or the coffee breaks, and how many stars do you give that speaker and that speaker. And that's a different kind of communication you need to do. If you're not, then I think the delegates won't tell you, and they will just switch to another conference, because there are loads of conferences.
I absolutely agree with you. And regarding this question, you probably know Slido. It's a Q&A platform that there you can ask actually questions anonymously, and it's so popular because while listening to a session, you can ask your question anonymously, and the questions get vetted. So like the best question, the audience votes for the best question to be answered. So for example, that's why for example, one way to go around these social norms and being afraid to speak in front of a large audience. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I personally, when I don't have Slido, I might not ask a question in public. I might wait until the end and ask the speaker. But we have quite some feedback here from the audience, and I want to bring it. Pepita says, the subject of how to be change ready is very relevant for the tourism and events industry. Pepita adds, we need to look at making change process a routine instead of a project. That's a great point.
I think if I can just interfere, I think it's probably not, the change process doesn't have to be or shouldn't be a routine. If change is getting a routine, it will go down as every process or everything you do that is a routine. And establishing a routine works for safety-focused employees or participants, but having a routine doesn't work for growth-orientated and growth-motivated employees or delegates. So again, there comes psychology in. It depends on the audience you are doing that change with.
It's very interesting. And what do you think about like presenting only small elements of change? Because sometimes as an organization, you can't just move this whole big organization and like change everything. But how like small incremental changes that indeed can be kind of a routine. So for example, I know some companies, entrepreneurial companies, they have one Friday a month. They just get up all the employees together to brainstorm this change and creativity. Is there an option, for example, to make it a routine?
A routine for a change process. I mean, life is full of changes, but a change process follows a certain structure, and it needs very good project management skills. So by definition, a change process is like a project. It can't take forever, because at some point people won't be motivated and are not interested anymore. And again, you shouldn't do the change just for the sake of the change. But I think you need to make it in small steps, and in between, you need to communicate a lot with your stakeholders, with your shareholders, with your delegates, with your whoever is a part of your change process. And it's about context. So if you do a change in your team, that change will affect the team culture or the organizational culture, but it also will affect the way your team is communicating with everybody else outside of the organization. And you need to be aware of that just changing one little thing doesn't mean that it wouldn't change in the whole system. So this is very important, and you need to not just have in German you say iterative process, I think, so a step-by-step process, but you need to also celebrate these little steps. That's, we call it milestones, or certain project parts. You need to not just make people aware of it and talk about it, but you need to really celebrate those things. It's because for you it might be trivial and smaller as the department head or a part of the project manager. But for some people, a small change is a very big thing. And you always need to think that it's not you, it's other people who have a complete different mindset. And that's what you need to follow.
Yeah, there is actually excellent book about it. It's called The Power of Moments. And that's one of these kind of the power of moments. It's how to celebrate the change. So I will link this book below, because it actually talks about how to celebrate and acknowledge any kind of new milestones in life. I will bring the comment from Pepita up. Business cycles are getting shorter and shorter, especially in the tourism and events industry. Now we are looking at an average of 6 years from start up to decline. Never mind this disruptions like Corona. That means that businesses need to reinvent themselves before they start the decline, around the 3-year mark. Thank you for the comment. It's a very good point, that the short cycles of business, and that we need to ask ourselves how our audience are responding to the new changes, and especially all the kind of the digital developments are so quick. So we need to adapt. Okay, and now we talked about actually tourism industry, and let's talk about destinations, because I know that a couple of destination representatives and DMCs are watching. So what concept of event psychology can be used in destination marketing?
Any, really, because I mean, per definition, there is no such theory or concept as event psychology. Event psychology is a mix-up or a collection of different psychological theories, concepts, methods, or models. So the question is rather, again, in your destination marketing activities, or in your DMO, what kind of things do you need to change? For example, because I focus on that. We did a research project with the university on emotional labor of destination marketing organizations with their stakeholders, because we see a lot, and not just in German-speaking countries, we see a lot of frustration when it comes to DMOs working with their stakeholders, because the stakeholders' mindset might be a complete different one than yours as a DMO, because as a DMO, it's your job, your duty to be on top of the topics and on top of the trends. But your stakeholders might not follow, or might not be able, or have the time, or whatever. And especially when it comes to stakeholders who are profit orientated. A sales manager of a hotel, of a location, of a congress center is profit oriented. They have goals. They have to get money, for the company. So they have a much shorter perspective compared to a destination, to a DMO. And that, of course, leads to frustration. But you need, in order to get that working, the problem is not changing the stakeholders, because we're just a very tiny part in our economy, in the global economy, and in your national economy. You're just a very tiny part as a DMO. You cannot change the whole system. This is something you would get even more frustrated of. And we looked at what kind of things would help DMOs, employees at DMOs, to work with the stakeholders. And in fact, it's emotional labor. So it's the regulation of emotions, and the question on how you, in that loop, in that continuous loop social interaction with your stakeholders, how you basically regulate your own emotions, but also as an emotional worker to regulate the emotions in your stakeholders. Because when you are aware and mindful working with your own emotions, it is a social loop, and the opposite, whoever person you're talking to, will change their emotions as well. You can change the emotions of others, and in order to change emotions, you need some skills. This is in fact a very important part, which we are not trained at all. I think it's a concept. Emotional labor is a concept established in the 70s by an American sociology. I don't know how to pronounce the word in English. Sorry. American researcher and scientist, and she established that, and they actually worked on airlines and how airline crews and plane crews could change the emotions at the people who sat in the planes, and still today, 50 years later, none of the universities who have tourism classes, none of the event management or DMO management seminars or academic educational programs, none of them teach you how to work with your emotions and regulate emotions in others. And I think as emotions are the basic of any further social interaction, you need to start there. And underlying emotions, again, are psychological needs and two different kinds of motivation. So a training on emotional regulation and emotional work and labor would be definitely the thing to start. And if it comes to marketing as a destination, I mean, you need to listen to your audience as a destination. And it's a very, I can just say it from my own experience. I think 2017, we started changing a lot of different events we did. When we went to a big city in Europe, we did an event with a lot of suppliers from Salzburg, probably. And usually you hear, oh, the suppliers are paying, so you need to do what they want. And we got really frustrated with that. So the problem was, as long as we were listening to our stakeholders purely and not bringing in our own perspective, but also the perspective of the market, we couldn't change it. And also because we didn't know how to be more resilient against the way our stakeholders talked with us once we changed the concept of our events, being more market-oriented, less than stakeholder-oriented. Once we started being more resilient, it took us 1 or 2 years with our stakeholders, and we had a lot of discussions, but very often in DMOs, employees rather leave the DMO instead of keeping up with the change, because they're not resilient enough. So resilience, emotional regulation is a part of resilience as well. So this is something I can just give as an example, but there are millions of different kinds of change processes and activities, marketing activities, etc. You might have a problem with, but in fact, emotions are always underlying it.
It's very, very interesting what you said, that you took 2 years to change this event concepts to be more market oriented. And yeah, it definitely requires patience and keep trying and experimentation to some level, and not just doing what you've done for the past 20 years.
It hurts.
So it's really, really nice. It's very good point. And I know I also attended your event in Munich a couple of years ago. It was 2019, I believe. It was great. It was about art, and it was great. Yeah.
It was the poetry slams.
Yeah,
yes.
poetry. Yeah, poetry
Yes,
slam. It was
poetry
in a
slams.
gallery. In a gallery. So the slam was quite also. It like make you think afterwards. So you leave the event and you think about what has been said and created during the poetry slam. So again, it's a very innovative concept. Hasn't been seen by many in the industry. So yeah, well done. And look forward to seeing more innovation coming from your own events. But we have one more question, and if anyone in the audience has a question, please let us know. And so far, we also talked a lot about change management. So I think we should already pin in our diary another topic about change management. So I think it's also quite a lot of interest now in the comments. So yeah, definitely, it's a completely different topic. But applying psychology to our events needs a professional help because it sounds very easy. Like, okay, you tweak a couple of things on the agenda, you change the setup, etc. It sounds very, very easy, but in reality, actually, it's very hard, and it requires a specialist help. So, why it's so important to work with the specialists, and how can we find the right specialist?
It's a very tough question.
But before, I think we have a question actually from Laura. It's a DMC in Italy. Culture has to be taken into account, and different cultures. Yeah.
Definitely, that's what I said before, I think, and that's what I meant with, if you change one thing in a system, the culture will change and the whole system will be affected. So the culture means, culture is something you kind of develop consciously.
I think Laura might mean the culture of internet. Maybe if you can specify, Laura, is it culture of international, like international cultures working together, like a multinational, or like the company culture? I think it's international context.
So
I think so.
So like ethnic backgrounds. Are you from Asian from an Asian culture? We call it. You would probably call it. Are you from an individualistic culture, or are you from individualistic or
collective?
A collective culture. Okay, thank you, Laura. So the question is always, of course, are you take a participant or a client from Japan? They might be completely different than a client from Western Europe or the United States. Even though and that's why it's so important to look at particular concepts that are well researched. That's why I refuse to talk about all these different concepts and theories. I look at concepts and theories in psychology that are well researched, also in a transcultural way. And the basic psychological needs, for example, the motivational orientation, so the regulatory focus, those are things that have been well researched, and they apply for any culture, individualistic cultures, or more, let's say, collectivistic cultures.
Collective.
But it's an important part you need to think of, because when it comes to social norms, again, somebody from a collectivistic culture, there's an example, women from, there's a very good study on women being more resilient to need frustrating situations. So let's take a female employee at a DMO in Japan, having troubles with a stakeholder who is frustrating her personal needs, for example. She would be more resilient because she's used to take a step back and suppress. So you basically suppress your emotions, which is not a good thing to do all the time. But sometimes taking a step in Europe, in individual cultures, for example, Europe, it is completely different. We are not used to take a step back if somebody is hurting our feelings, if somebody is not valuing us and frustrating us. We are used to, we don't even, very often we just give feedback, tell people, oh, if you're like that to me, I'm gonna be the same. And something that helps is reappraisal. We call it cognitive reappraisal. So you think about the situation, which is like, oh, that person might have a bad day or whatever, or the person doesn't know it better, or whatever helps you in order to get a cognitive process starting in that situation, which is very hard. But in fact, culture plays a role, and it plays a role if in an international set, because the reaction to change processes or frustrating situations during a change process, for example, they might be completely different depending on how the person has been raised. Even if that person lives in Europe now, they might still be differently orientated when they're from Japan, for example, and the other way around.
Yeah, Pepita, she agrees that's so true. In the service industry, we are used to bending over backwards for our clients.
And you need to learn how to make yourself. I don't like the word resilience, even though I use it, because resilience is huge. It's not just a buzzword; it's huge.
It's been used
and
a lot.
Emotional regulation is a much better word because it describes a smaller part of it, and we are used to bending over backwards for our clients, but also for our stakeholders as a DMO. And do everything what they, because who pays tells, and it is like that. So you can't change the system, but you need to learn how to cope with it. And to regulate your emotions, it's very important, as I said, to know that by regulating your own emotions, you regulate the whole process, so the interaction with others. And that's what you need to learn.
It's a very insightful answer. Thank you very much. So let's go to our last question, and there is still a chance to ask questions if anyone is interested. So we need to work with specialists. Why it's so important when we talk about event psychology, and how to find the right one? Because I think you already touched about like having a culture fit, that you align on the same values. But if you want to add anything else, then that's.
I mean, there is not the specialist, I think you need to look at, has that person had training? Do they have a psychological background, or enough experiences, etc. But it's hard for me to say what kind of consultant you should choose from. I'm sure there are many websites who would tell you what you should be looking for if you're looking for a consultant. But in fact, it should be somebody who knows their way around organizational psychology. And something that might be very important question to potential consultants or experts you hire for a change process is, what kind of methodology you work with, what kind of theories are underlying those things, and then you have a look if those theories are up to date. For example, everybody knows probably the needs pyramid from Maslow. Maslow is everywhere. Everybody knows Maslow and the pyramid with the human needs of that he kind of established. Maslow doesn't work anymore. Research found out years ago that part of it is true, but it's not set to take Maslow's pyramid of human needs and use it for an operational change process in a company, because the methodology doesn't work. So having someone who is up to date with theories and who can translate those theories for people who are not psychologists, that is probably very, very, very important.
That's a very good point. I think it's a good starting point for anyone. Like the whole chat is a good starting point for anyone who want to start with event psychology, implementing it into their events. So yeah, I think we are talking already for almost 1 hour. It's a lot of knowledge here, a lot of concepts to go and research, and I'm personally going to re-listen to the whole interview because it's a wealth of knowledge. So thank you very much, Gernot. I think
Thank you.
There's been shown interest towards change management, which could be another potential great topic to discuss. And yeah, I will just want to close this chat with maybe you say how people can get in touch with you. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation, have specific questions, or even wants to host an event in Salzburg, they can get in touch with you. So please share how to get in touch with you.
Well, I think if you look either up LinkedIn and if you look for my contact, of course you can get in touch directly. And to be fairly honest, I saw that we have a lot of DMCs, DMOs here today, and people from different destinations. If you need anything, let me know. I'm happy to support and happy to help. The more people start working on a conscious change in their organizations, the better. If you're looking for anything else, Google us, Salzburg Convention Bureau, of course. It would be great to hear from you. But if you are interested, I'm always open for having a chat, a Zoom call, or whatever, in order to clarify some questions for your organizations or for your personal life or for your leadership competences in your organization. So LinkedIn or our website at meetsalzburg.com would work as well.
Yeah, so I will close with this comment. Unfortunately, I don't know who commented it, but being open-minded is an important skill of a consultant, also to get involved with new models and approaches. And I think it's a great also way to close our chat. It's very important to be open-minded, especially times like right now. Explore new methods, new theories, new concepts, and yeah, be aware and know what's going also in other industries. Thank you very much, everyone who joined. Thank you very much, Barbara. If you want us to discuss any other topics, just let us know. We are here, we are open-minded, and we want to hear from you. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Bye, thank you.